Thank you.
Great to have you here. Thanks for making the trip.
Yeah. Wasn't that bad?
No?
No, it was okay.
You're coming from the Netherlands?
Yes.
And how long a flight was that?
About 7 hours. I think the wait in the lines of the Netherlands airport is maybe longer.
Right.
Lucky I have kind of a privileged status to get first, but yeah.
Well, great. Glad you're here. Thank you again. So I'm curious, right? So we got your title here. I know I looked you up online, ahead of time, LinkedIn, and Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, but AKA the tech guy. So tell me what that means and what it is that you do and what your role and your teams do.
Yeah, why did I put the tech guy? It's a good question. I put the tech guy in because kind of when you put your original title in, right, people think you're important, right? So you kind of to not feel too important and kind of get some work done. I put like the tech guy in on LinkedIn, and it also summarizes much better what I do, right? What I actually look at is kind of my job is to look at the technologies coming into play field like 3 to 5 years out, right? Having the ability to kind of not predict, but look at them, experiment with them, figure them out, and then kind of make ourselves and our customers ready, right?
Right.
In that perspective, because it's quite a large field, which we look at. We at Capgemini, just maybe for people that don't know Capgemini here, we're a 350,000 people big consultancy firm. And then when I say consultancy, everybody thinks like IT consultancy, or everybody thinks like software consultancy kind of topic, or they think McKinsey, Boston, like kind of the strategic consultancy.
Right.
But we have a totally different angle. We're actually from core engineering, like be it systems or be it actual products like Airbus engines or whatever, like kind of those kind of core engineering parts, to the strategic consulting part and everything in between.
Wow.
Right, so our breadth and width is quite significant, and also we are situated in about 50 countries, kind of growing constantly in that space.
So how do you, like, when I say your team, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like with such a large organization?
Yeah, it's kind of it's really a team. Right, because I think I really do believe in the perspective like leadership and management you kind of don't do alone, right? So it's like a council of CTIOs that kind of look at the future and try to understand kind of what's next. So it's a council about 20 people from different, like, well, we call them CTIOs because they both did the technical part, but also kind of the innovation part, which we feel that is kind of inherent into that space. And they have their own kind of technology domains, ranging from computing, right, quantum computing and like neuromorphic, or to cloud security, data, everything in between.
Okay, very cool. So one of the things I'm really interested in, because something I think most engineering leaders are trying to balance is that whole concept of innovation, right? And there's delivering what your customers are asking for, and then thinking about, well, what is it that we want to innovate? What do they need? Kind of the faster horse versus a car kind of thing. Like, how do you all think about balancing innovation with delivering kind of expected outcomes?
I think let's first put it the fact that a lot of people think about innovation and they think about invention. Right, something new and amazing, something which will change the world, right?
Right.
But there's also kind of this incremental kind of 10% innovation. I just mentioned like the 1% innovation or the 1% better every day. There's also kind of 10%. What do I kind of mean when I say 10%? It's also better tooling. Right, having the ability to write faster code, having the ability to get quicker answers, right? That is all innovation. It's kind of in the core of, okay, wait, can I do my job better and faster during the day? That is also innovation. So we'll look at that part. And of course, we look at the 10x stuff, and be it quantum computing, things that are out there.
Right, right. It's interesting you say that, because I know working with my teams, one of the things that becomes obvious, right, is innovation doesn't mean the same thing to everybody, right? So you have a team, and one person innovation is better tooling, right? It's like, how do I solve this problem? And then you have the 10x kind of thing.
Yeah.
So How, like, do you see any patterns across the different areas or CTOs that you're working with in terms of how they think about innovation?
Yeah, it is totally different, right? It's every terminology has kind of his own interpretation, and everybody has kind of his own interpretation of that terminology, right? I did kind of this experiment with when like 5-6 years back, when digital transformation was kind of a hot topic. Like when you went into a board and you just asked the question, like, can you please write down, right? What do you mean when you talk about digital transformation, or write down what you think? It's so different, and that aspect is so different. And I think the ability to kind of segregate in kind of the 10% and 10x and kind of that in-between space helps them also to understand, okay, wait, there is this position of innovation in the 10% part where you can actually achieve a lot, right? And don't have to do kind of this massive, new, super exciting thing.
Interesting. So one of the things I'm curious about too is just like with all the different areas, do they share ideas and concepts, and if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, and that's kind of the cool thing, right? Because we're so big, right? I live in a city in the Netherlands, which is about 160,000 people. Right? So when you kind of sit in this organization, and
it's twice as big as your city.
It's twice as big as the city, right? So when you kind of tell people that concept, it's very difficult kind of to understand what that means, right? Because it's such a large and distributed team, right? So we try to encourage that, right? So what we do, we have these CTIOs that manages different business units or the SBUs, or like what we call our global business lines. And global business line could be kind of insights and data. For instance, kind of that's a global business line. We have our strategic consulting, is also, which we call Invent, is also a global business line. And all of them have like a CTIO. For the Americas, we have the same, right? Kind of north and the south part.
Right.
And they sit together, and they manage kind of their own thing, but every month we're together, kind of talking about the different aspects, the changes. We have a full research team, right? Which is supporting like what is happening in the ecosystem, what is happening across the different lines, and try to kind of get our own. I call the process kind of sense, synthesize, and share. Kind of the sensing part is, okay, what's happening? What's moving and shaking in the different things that we focus on. And then kind of the synthesization is between the CTOs, kind of having the debate and discussion. What should we think about? What should we invest in? What should we kind of go for? Right. And then kind of the share is both internal as well as external, right? Kind of where do you sit? So that is a large piece of how do we kind of try to solve that puzzle to get people really involved.
I imagine like there are probably a lot of common things across, right? One of the things that Prashant talked about earlier, and we talk about a lot, is just the shortage of technical talent, right? And how do you attract, retain, and develop the technologists on your team? Is that something that you all spend time talking about?
Yeah, and if somebody here has a good idea how to solve that, I'm open to that conversation, because it is really difficult, right? It is super difficult. And we are trying to figure out and experiment with different topics, right? Be it, having, I think somebody mentioned, like, if you come into an organization and you feel that there's really crappy tooling, right? Yeah, it just doesn't feel right? So kind of, that's one piece. But then also, it's also what is the pool of people you fish from, right? So when everybody goes for the computer grades, right? It doesn't make sense, right? Because let me put it like this, right? We are so big, we have our own university, right? Kind of Capgemini University is a thing. You can do about 20,000 to 30,000 different courses on any topic you want. Like, and there's kind of specializations. So when we attract people, we can actually get people in that have a totally different angle, and we can actually train them to be maybe like a Salesforce expert, or be it in development, or being in functional setup, whatever, right, with our partners. And then when you're like trained out there, we have our partner systems that we kind of enable you to get into, but also the collaboration with the large universities, right? Be it MIT, Stanford, whatever you kind of think about, we can actually get you in there, and we can have specialized courses to kind of up-train you, right? So these are things we try to do, but still the rotation is quite big, right? I think there is a kind of the feeling of somebody told me, like, there's kind of a feeling of, are people leaving their job, because they're leaving, or because they feel kind of neglected in their job, and now trying to make the sidestep because they're also not bound to the organization.
Right.
Kind of, nobody really has a clear answer of why it's actually in that sense and space. So we're trying to set up kind of different pods of experiment, right, to kind of figure out what works well. But have to kind of say there is no one size fits all, right? Every country is different, every need is different. So when you're trying to figure it out for 50 countries, approximately, right, it's kind of difficult to have like one overall strategy.
Right. And did you have distributed, I mean, I know you have folks all over the world, but I assume, since the pandemic and everything, you've got a lot more people working remotely. Is that valid? And if so, how has that changed the way y'all think about things?
Yeah, it's been a massive change. I think Clive said it, right? Kind of that shouldering for developers, not only for developers, but just people coming into the organization is how you used to kind of get up to speed.
Right.
Learn the culture, understand it, get the feel for a place. Like, what can you do? What can't you do? Right? Can you wear these kinds of sneakers in your organization? Right? 9 years ago, I got backhand comments like, maybe you shouldn't.
Right.
Right? Okay, fine. So you kind of learn that in that set. Now we've all distributed, and it depends on where you sit in your career, right? I think it's mentioned a couple of times, right?
Totally.
If you're really independent, you're already kind of up to speed, you can actually move forward on your own. Then it's good.
Yep.
If you're just coming in, your insecurity is high, right? I know when I don't code anymore. We talked about it in the back, but I'm a below average coder in that sense. I don't have a computer science engineering degree, but I started I'm from '85, right? So kind of I started in the internet era, so everybody that has started in that era has some coding skills, because of the curiosity. And I got into coding a lot, be it from SQL to kind of big systems like ERP or whatever, like in the back end, or JavaScript, whatever. Like I tried everything, but I'm below average. And I remember that you used to sit on this coder table, right? Everybody wearing the headset, and you do your thing. And when you get up, you had to get coffee for everybody, and everybody knew exactly which coffee you should make for everybody. And if you're new, you kind of had to put on your own sign of this is the coffee that I expect, be it a cappuccino with this much amount of sugar or whatever, right? So now the distributed part is gone, right? It's that community is kind of gone and fallen off. And one of the experiments we're doing is, being back 8 days in the office of a month where you can kind of choose, and we leave it up to the countries, the leaders, the project managers, kind of how to get that done. But you also have to imagine that we have a different angle, right? We do mostly customer projects. We don't do kind of product engineering for ourselves and sell it, right? We do a lot of customer projects, so they have their own demands, right? So we are balancing both our own thinking and the thinking of the customers. There were some customers during COVID that said, no, everybody has to be there. So kind of what then do you do, right? Do you then say, okay, no, we can't, or no, I don't want to, or kind of those tricky spots we're also in.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the fact that, especially with the pandemic, people have different emotional reaction or whatever reasons for staying home, and a customer may have completely different expectation. Yeah. I also like the thought around early in your career versus later in your career. The need for camaraderie, the need for just feeling more confident. By getting that feedback consistently. That hadn't thought about that. How does that play out? I mean, that's got to play out even differently with you all, because you're sending people off to site. So they come out of the university, and then they get assigned to a customer, right?
Yeah, so, yeah. If you come really fresh, right? If you join a company, okay, you've done some of these things. But when you kind of join a consulting company, it's different. Like sometimes you're by yourself. Sometimes you're on a large project with a team. So you kind of this is a conference about Stack Overflow and tooling, right? The tool set is different. Every customer has their own preference, has their own tool set, has their own things. So you kind of, our people need to mitigate both the customer need, right? For instance, we do large-scale Salesforce implementations across the entire globe, right? Where Chris just talked about, how does he maintain Salesforce as a product to be kind of coherent? Mostly when you implement it at a customer, right? It doesn't make sense, right? You kind of have to retrofit it. Then you have to talk to the other teams, right? Because Salesforce is just one part of the puzzle, right? It connects to all the other pieces in the organization. And mostly when you do a large-scale project, it's all kind of Capgemini people combined with other, let's say, consulting firms trying to figure out how to actually fit all that together, right? So the tooling ranges in that sense. So kind of our people look at that tooling, but also their internal tooling. And that is kind of a difficult thing to manage, right? So how do you encourage people to do that? How do you encourage them kind of to be upbeat and upscale and not kind of have the ability or have the insecurity, right? Not to contribute, because it's quite difficult. You get in, you don't know anybody, right? So now you're in a project, which for a customer is really important.
Yeah, and they're expecting an expert, right?
Yeah, right? And maybe you are, but when you're new, you're kind of like expert floating in the middle of a lake.
Right.
Thinking, okay, I know how to swim, right? Well, which way should I swim? Right? Kind of that idea, right? So I don't know where the shore is because I can't see it.
Right. So are there any practices or things that you all leverage to help in that situation?
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where we have our own. I just saw the example of Udemy, right? Kind of, we have our own universities. We have our own experts, kind of getting like what we say. We build kind of these communities of curiosity around these topics, right? So kind of to help people, form their understanding around it. We give a lot of training to that, right? We of course have mentorship programs in place to kind of bind new people to somebody that has been there, right? So kind of all the normal and standard stuff that a lot of the organizations have. We also have to teach you kind of consulting skills, right? Which is different, right? You have to be able to talk to a customer, right? You have to be able to understand their problem. You have to be able to deal with their anger if it goes badly, right? Or whatever, right? Kind of how do you help them do that? Right? There's different angles in that space.
So I'm curious, because I'm sure you all are very data and metric driven, right? And productivity is super important, billable hours, or, but then learning is also really important. So how do you think about balancing the learning, and peer-to-peer learning, not just the education, the kind of getting started, but the continuous learning versus productivity? How do you think about balancing that?
Again, no right answer here, right? I'm just being honest, right?
It's a common theme with leadership,
No,
right?
it is. No, and there, of course it is, but it's kind of, on the one hand, you have to kind of make money. Right? On the other hand, you have to have the ability to elevate your own, let's say, value. We call it value in the market, right? If you kind of on old school stuff, the older the better, right? Because you have like high value, because nobody knows how to kind of code it anymore or whatever, right? But if you're somewhere in between, you kind of have to keep progressing. So we have kind of a balance between kind of 80 to 85% of your time should be like billable, and 15% should be in training. Most of the time is difficult to manage, right? When you have like engagements that go on, like if you have a customer project or program that you're running, it could run up to 3-6 months, a year, right? And you're fully booked in that. You kind of learn on the job in that perspective. But after the project is kind of done, you have a little bit of downtime. right? We don't force people to get onto a new project immediately, like directly. Like, you have that downtime. You kind of have the ability to kind of take a breath, have the ability to upskill yourself, right? To kind of have that going. We talked about it also in the back. We also put it as a performance management kind of thing, right? I know a lot are scared about it, but kind of contributing to platforms like Stack Overflow or contributing to open source programs, right? It is a performance metric for us, right? And so if you want to kind of grade, what we call like to your next promotion or whatever, you have to contribute. If you don't contribute, you kind of don't get the stamp of approval for getting forward in that, because it is also by your peers, right? So you kind of, your peers kind of are also your reviewers, and they want you to contribute. They want you kind of to share your knowledge. If you don't, that's good. You can also choose not to, but you will kind of stay in that same position.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And we did talk about that, right? I mean, there's all sorts of different ways to contribute, and if it's an area that's really important to your organization, sharing knowledge, right? It is a value, and you should be evaluated on it, right? And to your point, you either contribute and you're able to advance, or maybe not, right? Yeah. But it's a choice, and it's also the choice of the organization on what it values. So I think.
And how do you shine in that space, right? And you have to, you also have to think about. For us, it's also a security perspective, right? And nobody talked about this, right? But it is a security perspective. So our security, our cybersecurity CTO, he comes always with these crazy metrics of things like every 3 days, there's kind of a breach of somebody contributing to something to an open source platform or like a community where we think, okay, that you shouldn't do that because client data, proprietary, somebody by accident shared an IP address somewhere. Definitely when they're doing kind of training models and algorithms, right? Even worse, right? Even worse, you don't know what's hidden and what you can actually figure out from those algorithms. So baseline for Capgemini is you don't contribute. That's of course stupid. Nobody, no developer or no community kind of agrees to that. So we said, okay, we have a baseline, and the baseline is don't contribute because it's too big of a risk. But we said, okay, let's kind of start what we call an open source program office. What does that do? It's kind of a highly automated program office that looks at, okay, we've now started with GitHub because there is a lot of code exchange there. To kind of make sure it runs through checks when you want to contribute. And you submit kind of the thing you want to contribute, and it kind of runs you through the security checks, fully automated, and then says, yeah, it's fine to contribute, or right, whatever. Like the same goes for kind of platforms like Stack Overflow, right? Yeah. Can I contribute like my answer to a question that I know? Because I saw the memes like, the moment you know a question right, that you can actually answer, or you're like, yeah, let's answer it. But should you? Right, so kind of the baseline is no, you shouldn't, without having that step in place. So we are also trying to enable that perspective because we have to be careful, right? Just recently Uber was hacked, right? Just like last week, right? Or at least they published it last week. Yeah. But these kinds of things happen all the time, and it could also happen because we contributed to kind of something which it shouldn't. Yeah. But we do encourage our people to actually do that, and they get recognized for also, as somebody said, like the developers guys are crazy. Right? I do the same. Like on Sunday, I still go in to do stupid kind of like when the metaverse, of course, like kind of started lifting off. I said, okay, so what does that mean in Stack? So I wasted my Sundays kind of trying to figure out the different stacks and how it connects. So we kind of still do that, right? And then by enthusiasm, we kind of submit things that we maybe shouldn't. Right? So we try to make it as easy as possible for our communities to do that and kind of have that joy, but also do it in a secure way, right?
Makes total sense. And I mean, we also, Stack Overflow for Teams gives folks the opportunity to do it within their organizations, and still in a company that's bigger than your city. There's obviously some joy in sharing information with your peers, right?
Yeah. So. Yeah, and it's also distributed, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one other question, and then I'm sure we'll leave a little time.
Of course.
I know you spend a lot of your time thinking about 4 or 5 years out. So what are you thinking about right now?
So we divided it in a couple of things that we focus on, right? But if we look at the far outs, right? Why do it? Because one of the things that I need to do is kind of 3 to 5 years out, right? It's not something you predict, right? We kind of build that kind of future. We build towards the future that we want to have, right? I still believe that in that fact, like it's not going to be like one single breakthrough thing, right? We kind of build towards what we want. There's also kind of why I love the science fiction writings, right? Everybody's looking at it and like, oh, that we need to have that. We kind of build towards that. But thinking about things like synthetic biology, quantum computing, the metaverse, right? The metaverse in its trend line, everybody says, I don't believe in it, or yeah, but it's kind of very early, and it's not my job or our job to kind of say, I don't believe in it. Our job is kind of to experiment, what does it mean, right? How can it work? We talked about this, right? You have the Web 2 and you have the Web 3, but nobody really knows what the Web 2.5 will look like. So the Web 2.5 is that middle space where a lot of companies, like even like Nike, are now struggling, right? Because they have their NFTs, they do about 185 million just in royalty of like the NFTs, but they also do production. They also build their own shoes, right? They have SAP, they have Salesforce, they have old legacy landscapes, right? So how do you transition? And it's also internal, right? So how do I transition, for instance? Now we have quantum computing coming up, right? It's all physicists. It's like early 60s when like IBM started doing these print cards, right? On computers, you could code them. The abstraction layer is almost zero, right? You kind of are, okay, IBM has now some tooling, but we partnered with IBM, said, okay, how do we now kind of start building up these abstraction layers? And how do I shift all the guys that I have kind of in I&D and building algorithms and working with data and working with computing to this new thing, right? So we build a lab, which we call the Quantum Lab, right? We have somebody leading it. Julian Vervels is kind of our CTIO for the Quantum Lab. He is a physicist, by the way. But I want to help them transition, right? So the goal is there to kind of build a community, what they call kind of a community of curiosity. Like his task is kind of, you build 1,000 people. You have a core team of people that are actually doing the research with clients, with universities, whatever, like the PhD stuff, but also the abstraction layers of how do you build software on a quantum computer, how do you build algorithms, right? So to help people that want to do that, like on a Sunday, to actually be able to build quantum algorithms, right? We have that ability now, right? In Capgemini, you can just go and say, okay, I want to start building quantum algorithms to test on an IBM computer. You have 1 second on an IBM quantum computer, right? And so 1 second not sound like a lot, but like in quantum, it's lifetime, right? For people that have kind of explored it, it's a lifetime, right? To actually do stuff to test. So how do I enable that community, that large community of people that are working in the classical algorithms, right? To kind of have the ability to make that transformation and encourage them, have a look. So in 10 years, when quantum is big, I'm already kind of
bridging the gap,
right? And I have like 1,000 people at least, maybe 10, to kind of start doing quantum projects, like actual applications of quantum computing and everything.
Fascinating. Yeah, I love that. I didn't leave a whole lot of time for questions. I don't know if we have a question or two here. Let's see if anything comes up. They may just be keeping me honest since I was enjoying the conversation here and ran a little long.
No worries. I will still be around. So.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been really fascinating. I've really enjoyed talking to you and hearing about what y'all are doing. And can't wait to see y'all bridge the gap to quantum algorithms.
Me too. Yeah, let's see how that flows. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.